Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I think I've got a few viewers online now. I don't have anyone joining me online for this Google Hangout, but I know that there are a couple of people watching. And the idea of this is to have it as a permanent resource. So although this is a live broadcast, and some of you are watching now, it will be available after this on YouTube automatically. So when people in future ask me for advice about terms and definitions, I'll be able to direct them to the link on YouTube. And the idea is that this will be one of a series of online drafting clinics where we cover a variety of different topics that we often get asked about here at ISO Central Secretariat. As some of you might know, we give training several times a year to TC secretaries, but there isn't that much help available to conveners and project leaders. So I thought it might be a good idea if we do a few of these online Google Hangouts so that people can join in, they can view, they can ask questions, and then they also have somewhere to go afterwards on YouTube where they will be able to get some of their questions answered, I hope. Anyway, so to start off, I might just warn you that this is the first time I've ever done a Google Hangout, so if it doesn't go completely according to plan, please forgive me, and I'll try and improve for the next one. What I'm going to do is give a short presentation about terms and definitions, and then I will answer a couple of questions I've received in the last few days, and that will be it. So, first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Laura Matthew. I'm an editorial program manager here at ISO Central Secretariat. I've started here as a technical editor almost 4 years ago, and I also work as a technical program manager, so I manage several committees in terms of processes and procedures. Right, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen now and show you a quick presentation. That's the one I want. So hopefully you can now see my screen. So as I said, this is an ISO online drafting clinic talking about terms and definitions, and I'm Laura Matthew, editorial program manager. So to preface this topic, and part of the reason why we need to look at terms and definitions more closely is because, as some of you may be aware, over the last 2 years or so, we have been implementing XML publishing, and this does slightly affect how we draft our standards. So to give you a bit of an overview, XML works by tagging certain words and paragraphs so that data can then be transported and stored. This means that content can be used across different media more than once. So yes, it is going into your PDF, but that data is also being saved so that it can be used in other formats. For example, people now often want to use standards on iPads or even on smartphones. And by using XML, it can be put into different formats easily without having to be re-edited. So your terms and definitions that you're drafting now will not only appear in the present standard that you're drafting. You have to think of them as being available pieces of information that will then be searchable in various different places, most notably the online browsing platform, which I will talk about a little more in just a minute. So basically, XML means that we now have to pay closer attention to some of our rules of drafting. So the benefits of XML: it enables us to unify our work and simplify the process. So since we've implemented this here, we've really streamlined our production process here at ISO CS. For example, we used to have several different departments where different people would have to do different things. It would come in, a document would arrive with us, and it would be assessed, evaluated. Then it would be edited, then it would go to the drawing office to do things to do with figures, then it would come back to the editor, then it would go through a proofing process. So everything was very much in different little boxes, whereas now it's much more streamlined. The editor is responsible for the document from beginning to end, and we've been sort of empowered to do a lot of those tasks ourselves. It creates more user-friendly standards. So now all standards are very much interlinked. So you'll have a cross-reference to a different clause in the standard. You just click on it and it goes straight there. And the same with the bibliographical references. We can now provide standards in other formats, as I was saying before, such as if you want to use your iPad for a standard, you can now do that because we can produce things online and with EPUBs. Parts of standards are now easily searchable, and you can search across different standards. Again, this is something that's done by the online browsing platform, which I'm about to talk about now. So the online browsing platform, I hope that some of you are already aware of this tool that we have. It replaced this old thing we used to have, which was the concept database, where terms and definitions in all standards were listed. Anyway, we've replaced that with the online browsing platform. This gives online access to standards, graphical symbols, terms and definitions, codes, and collections. So if you're looking for a particular graphical symbol, you can go to the online browsing platform and look it up. If you're looking to see whether a term has already been defined in another standard somewhere, you can put it in the search box and it will tell you all the standards where that term appears. So rather than creating a new definition for something, you can just use a term that already exists on the online browsing platform. And that is the web address of the OBP. It gives a preview of publicly available sections of standards. So now you can look up a standard on the OBP and you can find the table of contents, the introduction, the scope, the normative references, the terms and definitions, and a bibliography. But all the clauses in between you will not be able to see. You have to buy the standard to have access to those. And the OBP automatically extracts terms and definitions from standards. So when we publish a standard using XML, that term will automatically be put on the OBP. So it's very important that they're drafted correctly and that they don't have things in them that are not compatible with this online system. The OBP also lets us search across different content. So if you search for ISO 9001, everywhere that ISO 9001 appears in our standards, whether it's in the scope, in the normative references, well, it wouldn't be in the normative references, but if it were in the bibliography, in the terms and definitions, it will appear there. So you can search across all kinds of different content. So onto the terms and definitions, the topic of today's drafting clinic. Terms and definitions should be grouped in one clause at the beginning of the document. Over time, we've often seen terms and definitions given in an annex. Sometimes committees want to differentiate between terms and definitions, so they want to put terms relating to one topic in one place and terms relating to another topic in another place. But unfortunately, this really has to be strongly discouraged now because, as I said, they won't work with the OBP if they're done that way. So they have to be put in one clause at the beginning of the document, right after the normative references, or if there are no normative references, then after the scope. They're classified according to a hierarchy of concepts, if possible. This means that you would group terms together according to how they're relevant, so how they relate to each other. So if they're terms about one topic or about one test method, you might put those together. The tendency for a lot of committees is to group things together in alphabetical order. This can be done. I mean, we wouldn't, if a document came into us at ISO CS in alphabetical order, we would not change that probably because of the trouble with changing all the cross-references. But committees should always be aware that the problem is obviously translation. So when a standard is translated, if the terms and definitions are in alphabetical order, they will then most probably end up in quite a random order when they're put in another language. So we recommend that they're always done as a hierarchy of concepts. You define only terms that are used in the document, so you don't need to define terms which might have something to do with the standard but are not actually mentioned in the standard. This often comes when people revise a standard and they might cut out a whole clause, but then terms that only appeared in that clause are still in the terms of definitions. So you need to watch out when you're drafting that your terms and definitions clause only contains terms that are in that standard. Any terms that are self-explanatory and can have different interpretations, they should not be in the terms and definitions either. It's really very specific terms that are in the context of that standard. And don't define any common dictionary terms. It's assumed that everybody understands common dictionary terms or can look them up in a dictionary. As you know, the boilerplate text in terms and definitions, it says, for the purposes of this document, the following terms and definitions apply. So it's really for the purposes of this document, you don't need to define any common dictionary term, unless they're used in a particular way that is relevant to this document. And as always, avoid trade and brand names, and also avoid archaic terms, colloquial terms. So here we have a very typical example of an extract from a terms and definitions clause. So that is the term number. The preferred term, in this case we have more than one. Often it's just the one term, so you don't need to worry about preferred and alternative terms. This is the additional term. And there is the abbreviated term if you have one. Again, this is something that may or may not happen. There's your definition. Language used in a domain and characterized by the use of specific linguistic means of expression. So you'll notice there that domain is italicized and it has a cross-reference. So that now, since we've gone to XML publishing, terms that appear in the same document will be, or in the same clause, in the same terms and definitions clause, will now be cross-referenced. So it used to be, they used to be bold, but now they're in italics with the reference number afterwards. And in the standard, that reference number would be a live link, so you can click on it and you can go straight to see how the term domain would be defined in that standard. Then notes to entry. Now these used to be just note 1, note 2, etc. Now we've changed them to notes to entry. This is just to differentiate them from notes in the rest of the body of the standard. So note 1 to entry there is giving extra information. The specific linguistic means of expression always include domain or subject, specific terms and other kinds of designations, as well as phraseology, and also may cover stylistic or syntactic features. Then also we have the source there. We've slightly changed how we do that. Now it should be explained if a source definition has been modified in some way. This really should be signaled in some way. So here they've said that they've taken this term and definition from ISO 950, but they've modified it by adding that note 1 to entry. And as you'll see at the bottom of the slide there, all the information for terms and definitions is in the Directives Part 2, 6.3.1 and Annex D. The Directives Part 2 are being revised at the moment, but the next version is not imminent. It will be in the next year or so, I think, and that will incorporate these changes that have come into being since going to XML. So definitions. Definitions should replace the term in context. So rather than being a description of the term, you should be able to use the definition instead of the term. So if I said, I rode my bicycle, I would be able to put the definition in instead of bicycle, and I would be able to say, I rode my metal contraption with 2 wheels. And now I've replaced the term in context. It should have no article at the start, so that would be the, a, an, any, or all. No full stop at the end. It is not a sentence, it is a definition, so it requires no full stop. And no circular definitions. This means something that basically explains itself. So a waterproof watch, a circular definition of that would be a watch that is waterproof. No requirements are allowed in definitions, and no multiple meanings. If you have one or 2 or more separate meanings for a single term, the way to do that is to, you have a different term number, so maybe 3.2 and 3.3. The term might be the same, but the definitions will be different. And the way that people can see that they're different is at the beginning of the definition, you put triangular brackets, as is shown there in the subject field, and you put the subject of that definition, so what it's relating to. And avoid using equations, figures, or tables in definitions. Again, these do not translate very well to the OBP. So as far as possible, you can make reference to an equation, a figure, or a table that maybe you've put somewhere else in the document. But for the actual definition itself to contain that could cause problems. When it comes to abbreviated terms, it used to be the case that they were part of the terms and definitions clause. So you'd have maybe 3.1 would be terms and definitions, and then 3.2 abbreviated terms. It is helpful to define all the abbreviated terms used in a document, but they should be in a separate clause. So they normally come under clause 4, if assuming that terms and definitions are clause 3. So they're in alphabetical order with no introductory sentence. So your abbreviated terms would look something like that. Of course, if you have a terms and definitions clause where you are defining some of the things that are in your abbreviated term, you can just incorporate the abbreviated terms into terms and definitions. So if you had a term, uniform resource name, you could put that uniform resource name and then the abbreviated term, URN, and then the definition. But we have to assume here that maybe there is no definition, these things are not given in the terms and definitions. So someone has created a separate abbreviated terms clause, and this is very helpful for users to refer to. And the same is true of symbols. They can be incorporated into the terms and definitions. So under the term, you would then put the symbol before the definition, and people can easily refer to that. But if you don't have a terms and definitions clause, or the symbol is for something that is not in the terms and definitions clause, then it's very useful to have, again, a clause dedicated to symbols. So very much like abbreviations, it is helpful to define the symbols. They should be listed in alphabetical order with no introductory sentence. So, for example, they would be like that. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Let me just have a quick look if I've received any questions live. No, I haven't. I haven't received any questions as far as I can see. But please, if you have any questions regarding this Google Hangout, maybe it has provoked some questions that you know that you have for. You can either post them on the Hangout page, and then people will be able to see what's been asked, or you can email me. I did have one question in the lead up to this. That was whether it's possible to, rather than referring to a term or listing a term that's given in another document, whether you can just now give the link to the online browsing platform. At the moment, I would say no, because that's not the way it should be in the ISO IE Spectums Part 2. We have to always assume, we have to produce standards assuming that some people don't have access to the internet, so they might only have a printed PDF. And in that case, if you just link to the OBP, then that person will be able to see that. So at the moment, but maybe in future, that is something that will come about. I think it's quite likely. So you always have the directives as a resource, and you always have your editorial program manager here at ISO Central Secretariat to answer any of your questions. But in the meantime, I hope I've helped you understand terms and definitions, how to draft them, and how they fit into the new system of XML publishing. So if you have any suggestions for other topics you would like to cover in ISO online drafting clinics, please do let me know, and we will consider those in the future. And I would really welcome feedback on whether you think it's a useful system, if there are any improvements that could be made. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been until next time. Thank you.